Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing absolutely fantastically. Probably doing a lot better than a lot of jewelers are around this country, maybe even around the world, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
Well, in case you haven't read the news, or in case you haven't been looking for jewelry, or in case you don't run a jewelry shop, you might not know that the wholesale diamond industry is collapsing, and just really overall foot traffic in jewelry stores across the country, in North America, just around the world, they've also been declining, as is evidenced by Signet Corporation's recent earnings announcement. I do have to make the caveat, we don't make a market, we don't own Signet in any significant form. I don't own it, Sam doesn't own it, either directly or indirectly, so this is not a comment about the company as much as just stating the facts. And its most recent quarterly earnings announcement wasn't good. That's just no way to put lipstick on the pig. Earnings were off, revenue was off, and then you take a look at what's going on with diamond prices. The wholesale price floor has collapsed. De Beers has pretty much thrown up the white flag, and there's something out there called the Diamond Standard Coin and Bar. I'm not going to go into how it all operates. Let's just say that these coins and bars pretty much set the de facto commodities price for diamonds, if you will. And recently it's fallen to an all-time low, at least for this particular index or series, with the high being back in, I think, around 2011, around $8,300 or thereabouts. I might be off by just a rounding error. Recently it's fallen to about $3,500. And so since the beginning of the year, we've seen a collapse in wholesale diamond prices of about 20%. And since it's high, it's down way over 50%. And Sam, when I'm taking a look at this, I'm taking a look at people spending money on all kinds of different things, lots of fancy cars out there, people spending money on a lot of luxury goods. The U.S. the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, everyone's telling us that the U.S. consumer has been strong and, all of that stuff. And yet, here we are taking a look at jewelry prices, taking a look at jewelers, taking a look at diamond prices, and these things have collapsed or doing very poorly. What gives?
Well, I can't really think of many more goods or categories that are considered more discretionary than jewelry.
Completely elastic.
You might say, well, I really want to get married, I have to buy something. Well, you don't have to buy the big diamond. There's trade-offs. I think a lot of people may push back on that. I saw the
diamond that you bought Hannah, and I'm not sure if I think you're talking out of both sides.
Well, that may not be the case in our house, but you get what I'm saying. This is not something you don't have. You can trade down. There's lots of things you can do. It's a very discretionary category, and we've seen discretionary spending as a whole. Rightfully so. People are getting choosier with what they want to spend their money on, and that's how it should be when things are getting tighter. When inflation is still too high and prices aren't coming down, you're saying, hey, these things I have to have those, even though they're a bigger part of my budget now. Those things I don't have to have, I'm going to pick and choose on what really is most important out of that category for those that can't have any discretionary spending. And Signet, we're not picking on the company itself, but public companies are the best, barometer for a category because they have to report a lot of this stuff. And so we get to see things that otherwise we don't really get to see, the nitty-gritty, the margins, the earnings, things like that. And it really seems like that has been a part of, I think a lot of what you mentioned feels like escalation, but this has been a trend for really probably a couple decades now. Yeah. And I think that's something that is probably going to continue. Well,
I would tell you, as I've already said, I think wholesale diamond prices pretty much peaked out in like 2011. So it's been over a decade. What's that, 13 years, soon to be 15 years ago, that wholesale diamond prices have peaked, and they have gone down precipitously since then. One trend or one direction in that trade. And just as a point of clarification or just education or elucidation, if you might, Sam, it's a big word. If you're not familiar with Signet, it is a conglomerate, or just a holding company is a better way of putting it, of a number of different retail jewelers. If you've ever heard of Blue Nile, heard of Jared, heard of J.B. Robinson, K Jewelers, Pagoda, or Zales, amongst others, you've heard of Signet. So that's where we're coming from with this. It's a lot of data and a lot of stores out there. But you're right about that. This has been going on. This isn't new. The diamond prices aren't new. And it kind of begs the question for me, Do you think this has a lot to do with millennial and Gen Z spending patterns, spending habits? They're the people that might be more in the market for jewelry at any given time than maybe than maybe my generation, or certainly the boomers at this stage of their consumer career. Do you think it's really has more to do with just changing personal preferences?
I think it does, at least to an extent. We already talked about the consumer tightening their budget a little, but that's been more of a recent thing, I would say, than this past 15 plus years that we're talking about, this contraction. But, things like moissanite, things like the lab-grown diamonds, which are anatomically real diamonds. I mean, they look the exact same under a microscope. The fact that these other options, I think, are becoming more mainstream, and I think I can think of plenty of people where if I said, "Hey, why don't you just do a lab-grown diamond?" they would almost gasp at you.
Yeah.
And I'm picturing more older people in general.
Yeah.
And that I think is changing, and it's slow. But just those options, moissanite not even being a diamond at all, is things like this that I think really kind of decays some of that almost artificial value of diamonds, and that's a big part of it. Is it's basically, propped up what a lot of the value is.
Well, the first time I heard lab-grown diamond, I immediately thought rhinestone, which is for a little more than cut glass. I mean, that's about it. It's a lot more to it than that. But one of the things I think is really going on in your generation and the generation below it, and just changing consumer patterns, is almost with jewelry is almost like the same thing that we're seeing with things like china, fine china, furniture, all these things that baby boomers in my generation have always placed a lot of importance upon, seem to be a heck of a lot less important. And I would tell you that I think a huge chunk of it, I might even be more than think, I think I strongly believe that a huge chunk of why these things are kind of fading in value is Sam's supply. Because if you think about it, when you die, you're not taking your furniture with you. So that furniture is still around. You're not taking your china with you, so that china's still around. Some people might take some of their rings and necklaces with them, but not all of them. So that stuff is still around.
Once it's out there, especially diamonds that are forever.
Yeah, diamonds are forever. There you go.
Well, James Bond.
So these things are being passed down from generation to generation. Obviously maybe not an engagement ring. Sometimes that is the case, but certain things like that are just being passed down. So the need is not for your generation, for the Gen Z coming after you. Are you Gen Z or millennial?
It depends. I'm basically the year of the cutoff, so depending on what you see.
I'm going to call you millennial for this. And so, but Gen Z and millennials, they have access to all this without having to spend big bucks.
Another part of it, you're spot on, and the other part of it that I think is damaging to the jewelry industry, or what we're picturing as the jewelry industry, the Jared, Blue Nile, all these things, is honestly companies like Amazon. You are seeing that is the new big thing, is jewelry pieces off Amazon that are $20 that look like some fancier thing, and the status symbol of it being real versus fake, I think, is vastly eroded, and not just in jewelry. I think you can include watches, handbags. I know more people that could afford real handbags and would prefer to go get it up in New York City than people that get real ones at this point. And so I think just the value for it being real has really eroded, because frankly, I think a lot of young people now almost assume it's going to be fake.
Yeah.
So if they're going to...
why not? The news is fake. Why shouldn't my handbag be a fake? And
it's so common now. So if one person has a $10,000 bag and 9 other people have the fake version that costs $40, the odds are that person's is fake too, whether it is or not, so I might as well get the fake version.
Well, you're bringing up a very valid point, because let's face it, if someone goes to Bulgaria or some other place and buys a diamond ring set in a platinum setting, and I go to Zales and I buy a diamond ring set in a platinum setting, now certainly there are going to be some snobs and elitists that will know the difference immediately by looking at it, but how many people truly can?
Almost none.
Almost.
These are things you need a microscope. These are things that if you clean your ring well, it's going to look better than a nicer ring that's has a little grime on it.
Yeah, and there might be some people out there yelling and screaming, hey, I'm going to tell you, that's me as a, a reasonably well-educated person. I can't tell the difference between any of it. It's not in my wheelhouse. I don't care. And so when you take a look at that, take a look at everything that's going on, why not have the lab-grown diamond? Why not have the lesser version? Why not, use the China pattern from grandma as opposed to going out to, Bromberg's or someplace else and registering for your own bone china and all that stuff? Why not use that and save your money for other things that you would rather purchase?
I mean, I even see people, this is kind of on topic, but weddings, people preferring to have small weddings and spend the money on an extended honeymoon. I've seen people do a month-long honeymoon because they basically skipped out on the big fancy wedding. That is a trend I think that was it grew during COVID, but I don't think is reversing, of younger people wanting to spend more on trips, on concerts, on things like this, to go out and do something, experiences. And hey, I don't need the fancy tennis bracelet. I can get something off Amazon that I love, and it's $20.
Yes. Well, I might not be able to get the $20 tennis bracelet past Beth. Maybe you can get that past Hannah. I don't think you can, though. But I certainly get your point. And another thing that I think is going to be difficult for a lot of these jewelry companies moving forward is a lot of the brands that they sell. Take your standard retailer, that's selling a number of different brands. I can go to Julie Voss, which is upper end costume jewelry, as you well know, and people that love Julie Voss, it's not costume, that's fine. You know what I'm talking about. I can go to David Yurman. I can go to a number of different websites and purchase their stuff directly and have it shipped to my house. So when you have number of different places to get the same thing, ultimately I would say what you're doing is actually eroding the value or the prestige value of it, which will obviously put a ceiling on the price that people are willing to spend.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing the number of businesses in the space continue to contract. That is a downward trend.
That's why Signet owns all of them.
Yeah, we're seeing employment decrease across the spectrum there, and that's still expected to decline another couple % over the next decade. So we have a lot of these trends, these downward trends, these kind of not positive things. And it makes sense, whether it's directly online. Blue Nile's even a great example of, that's exactly what it is it's just an online, this is the specs of it, this is the grade.
Listen, I went to Blue Nile earlier this month to figure out Christmas shopping, and let's just say we're not going to Egypt at the Norris house. You know what I'm saying?
But so these are things that are not really changing. This trend is really probably going to continue, and you have several reasons why. It's changing consumption patterns, more people open to lab-grown diamonds, to stones that aren't diamonds, to knockoffs with purses, what have you. The trends, I think, are changing from where people have to have the high end, the real deal of everything.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is kind of something that I've kind of wondered. You hear a lot about blood diamonds. You hear a lot about, saving the world's forest and what have you. Do you think any of this decreased demand or importance on this type of stuff amongst your generation and the generation below it, or just generally people your age, has anything to do with environmental or ethical concerns? People aren't necessarily going out and spending as much money on diamonds because of the whole blood diamond industry, or they're not buying wooden furniture because they don't want to cut down the world's forest. Do you think it's something along those lines, or is that more the story as opposed to the actuality?
I think it's the latter. I'm sure there's people in pockets of younger people who are doing things like that, but I think that's more story than truth. And the reason people are changing is because of prices more so than, if De Beers flooded the market with diamonds and real diamonds became cheaper than fake ones.
Which I think they're going to, pretty soon going to be forced to have to do.
That's a stigma, because that is just, like I said, they are diamonds. They are real diamonds.
Yes.
They are just not naturally grown diamonds.
Yes.
They're real in every sense of the word.
I wonder how they do that. That's pretty cool.
It is, and they're perfect almost. They're more perfect than natural diamonds, which makes sense. If you're going to make it in a lab, you don't need any of the, whatever they call them, flaws in them.
Yeah.
So that if real diamonds became significantly cheaper than these perfect lab-grown diamonds, I think the demand for those would go up more than lab diamonds.
All right, so that begs the question. I mean, it's when you take a look at all these things, take a look at the alternatives, and really it doesn't matter what it is. When you take a look at supply and demand, there's always going to be, are there any alternatives? What are the alternatives? And we're already kind of establishing there's alternatives to natural diamonds. There are alternatives to, let's face it, bone china. There's alternatives to wooden furniture. Do you think just simply because the supply of everything is so great that, with the exception of some super luxury type stuff, a lot of companies are going to be finding themselves having a very tough row to hoe, just because younger people are just simply not placing as much importance in some of these things, and then also they can find much cheaper alternatives?
Yeah, I think it's really several-fold. It's that supply that is getting relatively saturated, at least in the developed markets, for a lot of these goods. I think it's the stigma kind of being removed of buying knockoff versions, or the what used to be considered lesser quality. I think that stigma, more so than anything, changes people's buying patterns, especially related to diamonds. I think it used to be almost you didn't want people to know if it was a lab-grown diamond.
Yeah.
I think that's changing. I don't think we're there to where you're bragging about it. But again, I think that is changing enough to where if you say, hey, it's not embarrassing, but if you felt like it was embarrassing to have a lab-grown diamond, but now you don't feel as embarrassed and you can save 67% on the price of it, that sounds pretty good.
Bragging about
it sounds pretty good. So I think that trend is changing, and I think that's something that is a generational thing that's probably going to continue.
Well, I will tell you, it's not just your generation. I've been throwing your generation and all the younger generations underneath the bus. I think we're also seeing it really with my generation, Gen X, and maybe even some others. I can't think of any others, but for instance, my mom, and blessed to still have her alive, hoards china. I think she has 3 or 4 full place settings of fine china. They also have these very old pieces of furniture. One is a rope bed, the one that I'm thinking about, that would suggest that my ancestors or my great grandparents or whatnots lived in Munchkin land. Very small bed. Maybe 5.5 feet long and all that stuff. I don't really want this stuff. Now, I'm happy to have it, I guess, but what am I going to do with it? I mean, because as Beth and I have been married and progressed in our relationship, I've got more plates than I know what to do with. I've got more furniture than I know what to do with. So what am I going to do as this stuff is passed down to me? Do I think that, and I don't think that necessarily John and Annie, my children, are going to be real desirous of a bunch of plates that, came from someone that they've never met.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So, and the same, I guess you could say the same about you.
Absolutely. It's just, you get so much stuff that you start, it impacts what you want more of.
Yeah.
I don't want more drinkware or plates or any of that stuff.
I mean, I've already got too much of it. One last thing before we let you all go here today. A lot of what's going on in these segments, if you ever go to a estate sale or go to a yard sale, you'll see a lot of plates and even some furniture out there, and it's much cheaper than it should be, or at least what you thought it was going to be. A lot of why we've seen prices for stuff that used to be valued so highly come down truly is the availability of supply. Not so long ago, 100 years, certainly 200 years ago, furniture was made out of wood. There wasn't an IKEA. There weren't massive furniture companies that were churning out every different types of furniture. You didn't have a bunch of wrought iron furniture. You didn't have that type of stuff. It was made by the local carpenter. Same thing could be said for jewelry. There just wasn't the same amount of it out there. And even plates and flatware and all these things, the supply of it is just very limited. Now it's almost inexhaustible.
Yeah.
And so that is the reason why I think I think these prices have come down. I'm not sure if it's really a generational preference. I think it's just simply a supply and demand thing.
I think you're spot on.
All right. Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. If you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always reach us by dropping us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, where you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in reading more, hearing more of what we have to say or how we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, oakworth.com, and leave and play around in there underneath the Thought Leadership tab. You can find links to all kinds of exciting information, including previous episodes of this podcast, Trading Perspectives, links to our blog/newsletter, Common Sense, as well as our quarterly analysis called Macro and Market, and a bunch of other analysis that we have in there, including items from our advisory services team, headed up by Mac Frazier, as well as pieces by our client advisors such as Richard Littrell, Janet Ball, John Hensley. I think Cliff Nail has a few pieces out there, and others. So, Sam, with that, what else you got to say?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.